BreachLock is a global leader in continuous attack surface discovery and penetration testing. Since BreachLock was founded, they are adding over 50 new customers every month. They have discovered over 1 million reported vulnerabilities and performed more than 20,000 pen testing engagements, including pen tests for over 15,000 web applications, 8,000 mobile apps, more than 100,000 APIs, over 10,000 cloud security audits, and over 200,000 network endpoints. They test your entire attack surface and help you mitigate your next cyber breach before it occurs. Know your risk. Contact BreachLock today. Visit securityweekly.com/BreachLock. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. We got a couple of RSA announcements, which is coming up very soon. It'll be May 4th through the 8th. So Security Weekly listeners, if you haven't already bought your ticket, 6th through the 9th, actually, is RSA conference. But you can save $100 if you're going to go out there last minute. You can visit securityweekly.com/RSAC24. Use the code 54USSECWeekly, USECWEEKLY. We hope to see you there. Cyber Tacos will be an event being held on Monday, May 6th. Of W2 Communications and the Cyber Risk Alliance are bringing tacos, cyber tacos even, back to San Francisco. So if you like eating free tacos, sipping on margaritas, and mingling with cyber professionals from all over the world, if it sounds good to you, make sure you register by visiting securityweekly.com/cyber tacos. And we've added Mr. Lee Neely. Lee, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here. Are those cyber tacos being delivered on a cyber truck?
I don't know. Do they have like a sprinkling of SSL on the top or something?
There we go.
And what do we have? Mr. Sam Bound is here with us. Sam, welcome.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Sam, you're
I saw a cyber truck in the wild just once, maybe. Oh, yeah. Good.
You did? Oh, you saw a cyber truck?
Yep.
Ugly.
Just one around here. Yes, it's ugly and kind of ridiculous, but
what is that? Is someone doing some renovations in the background?
That's them checking out their new
No, we have steam heat.
Oh, the old sound of steam heat.
Wow, the pipes heat up and they make bang.
Cool. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
It's a blast from the past here.
Right.
Also a good movie.
You were saying that
I want to
Sam
talk
is
about
speaking at RSA. Let's not lose that.
Oh, yeah. Do we not? You are speaking at RSA. When and where?
Well, yeah, in one of the villages, the Dark Arch Village, on Thursday at 11:30.
Sweet.
Talking about AI, of course. What else?
Of course, talking about AI.
AI security,
Let's start with an AI-related story. My story number one. OpenAI's ChatGPT 4 can autonomously exploit 87% of one-day vulnerabilities. If there ever was a misleading title, it would be that. Also, one of the comments from one of my coworkers was, this paper would never pass peer review. So now I'm reading it with that in mind. So I think I was probably more critical.
If it's AI generated, then what is the concept of a peer review in the first place?
No. The paper wasn't AI generated.
Maybe it was.
Maybe it was. Now that you say that, Jeff, and now that I say that out loud, it very well could have been. Which actually I would give them credit for, to be quite honest. But this is, so the misleading parts of this, 87% is the 87% of the 15 vulnerabilities that they hand cherry pick to feed to ChatGPT 4 in order for ChatGPT 4 to read the CVE description and then generate an exploit for it. So it wasn't, I think sometimes people, like when I listened to my podcast this week, I kind of got the impression that they ran all the CVEs through it, and 87% of them, they were able to generate an exploit for. I'm like, well, that's kind of impressive, but also hard to believe. And then I was like, you know what? I got to go read the paper for myself. So today I sat down and I read the paper for myself, and I was underwhelmed for a lot of reasons. One is because it was only 15, and they called them one-day vulnerabilities because this was the one-day vulnerability was there was a vulnerability published, but they said that people hadn't applied the patch and therefore it's a 1-day vulnerability, which I think I have. I can go back to my slides. I think I have a different definition of a 1-day vulnerability. And I have a different definition than what they described in the paper. I have to pull up my slide for it because that was based on research from Aquasec that did an amazing job of describing 0-day, half day, 1-day, 1.5 day. And I credited them in my slide, and I was like, this made sense to me. I like it. They had a GitHub project that executed their ideas, and they did a great job, and I applaud them for it. This description of 1-day I thought was kind of weird. I think 1-day is maybe there's a patch, but people haven't applied it. But it also implies that there may not be a CVE issued for it. But the ones in their list, there was a CVE. There was in some cases already a public exploit for it, which was the other thing. Like there already was a public exploit for it. And how do we know that if you chose a list of vulnerabilities and there's already public exploits, that those public exploits hadn't already been fed into ChatGPT, giving it, I mean, not an unfair advantage, but you have to disclose it that that's an advantage that ChatGPT had. Sam, you've read this paper. I can tell by your expression.
Well, I read part of it. Their claim is that the LLM they used was only trained on data through 2021 or 2022, so it couldn't know the new things. However, it only worked with GPT-4, and I'm not sure if people really know if that limitation is still in there in GPT-4. But I really like your comment about cherry picking, because my first thought when I read this is, wait a minute, most CVEs don't have an exploit, and there never is an exploit. So it'd be superhuman to find 87% of them. So they only found ones they could verify, which means a sort of ordinary human could make the exploit. So they've chosen the very easiest ones right there.
Correct. So some of these had Metasploit exploits already.
Yeah. Well, the part about it not passing peer review, I think, is a cogent point, because the fundamental point of scientific peer review is they have to explain it well enough so you can reproduce it. And they totally do not explain what they did. They said it took up to 100 steps to exploit the thing. So does this mean there's a human writing another prompt for 100 steps, or exactly what? I really was not clear how it worked and how they trained it and stuff. So, I mean, I'd like to know more details before understanding how much this means.
Did you get to the part where there was this wacky comparison between, we used ChatGPT-4 to generate an exploit for this vulnerability, but then we also compared that to, they called it scanners, like vulnerability scanners. And we compared it to Zap and Metasploit. But I'm like, Metasploit's not really a scanner. It's an exploit framework.
Yeah.
And Zap is kind of a weird thing to compare it to. Like I thought that was kind of wacky.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the fundamental article misunderstanding it, or just the journalist writing about it.
That was in the paper.
Maybe we've given it enough attention, and we should move on.
Yeah.
But paper aside, I think where I'm excited is to see this research continue, right? What I think this paper did, probably not by design or intention, is kind of shine a spotlight on and get people thinking about, what if we were to train a model and point it at CVEs and have it on a so my thinking was, I want a service on a continuous I would subscribe to this in a heartbeat. On a continuous basis, every CVE that's issued, we're going to run all the information that's publicly available through the LLM, and it's going to do its best job of creating an exploit. And you subscribe to this service and you get that data, like in a heartbeat, like, take my money. I would totally, and I don't even think that should be a paid service. I think the various vulnerability programs should just do that. Like every time we publish a CVE, we should take all the data running through an LLM and have it generate an exploit along with a score, like a confidence score of how well we think this exploit is going to work. This should just be publicly available information, in my opinion. Because you know what? Attackers are going to do this. Some defenders are going to do it. Why should it be the people that pay money? We should just let it go generate exploits.
I like the idea that the score in part could be the complexity or the length of time it took to come up with an exploit, because I think that's an important data point that could influence people's risk prioritization schemes.
Sure. And I mean,
what do they need to patch?
maybe the exploits most of them wouldn't work, but maybe it's a starting point, and maybe there's a program where people can work with them and contribute back or whatever. But
I mean, I remember back in our Tenable days, arguing with Renault about certain vulnerabilities that we had to report on and their severity levels, especially the cryptographic things, like we were talking in the previous segment about the strength of hashes and things like that, and SSL and TLS. And when SSL was deprecated, that was a big deal for a lot of people. But Renault was of the opinion, yes, but the amount of things that have to be in place, the complexity of actually coming up with an exploit that effectively does exploit the weakness of SSL is pretty intensive, and it's pretty expensive. And what do you get at the end of the day? You get one data set, and who would do that? So I think that's something that's worth an LLM.
No, I agree that what you said in that context should be taken into account for the severity of that vulnerability. I still want to know, kind of back to my point of, I want to know if I'm using a cryptographic algorithm that could be, broken in some way, and I need to go to the next version of it to be more resilient. I still want to know. I may not act upon. I may make a calculated risk decision and go, look, we're not going to patch this now, but I want to know. I want to have that catalog documented somewhere that, yes, I'm going to get to this kind of thing.
But an LLM could start to catalog the types of activities, the things that need to be in place, the amount of physical access you need already, or whether it's completely remote, unauthenticated exploit, all those types of things that we always used to talk about. But I don't know that they've always been. I don't know that they've ever been effectively characterized. Maybe CVSS version 3 or now 4.
No, it's
stab at it.
What you're talking about more is EPSS, exploit predictability scoring system, uses a machine learning algorithm, which is pretty good. From what I understand, I'm not the world's foremost expert on it, right? But knowing some of the background and talking with people about it, it's pretty good. The problem with today, it's not kept up to date, right? Which kind of speaks to the state of vulnerability tracking and management today. In any case, I thought I had something else along those lines of tracking. Oh, my story number 12 it relates to this, and I think I even have another one. But so this story is the title is NVD delays highlight vulnerability management woes, put malware first. So we all, we've talked about on the show in previous episodes and highlighted in my talk at B-Sides Charm that the various, it's not just NVD, it's not even just CVE. I mentioned EPSS. Like a lot of these vulnerability tracking and scoring mechanisms that are backed by, funded by, resourced by, staffed by, albeit government agencies, let's say, are understaffed, underfunded, and not getting the love today, right? We've seen a lot of evidence of that, a lot of articles written about it. And what this article is from Reversing Labs. In the Reversing Labs article states, while the NVD is still useful, it's not equal to the challenge of managing the risk from the rise of software supply chain attacks. Rather than focusing on remediation of vulnerabilities, to manage modern risk, teams need to shift their focus to active malware and modern attack techniques such as software tampering. Now, fundamentally, maybe I agree on the surface, but I disagree with, like, we can't just throw out vulnerability and patch management and go, like, let's just focus on the malware and detecting tampering in the supply chain. Look, I'm all about detecting malware and tampering in the supply chain, but you can't just throw out all of the vulnerability stuff, because the remediation for tampering is to apply a software update. I'll give you an example. With XZ, yes, a CVE was issued, and the fix is to make sure that you update your software. So the identification and remediation, that process is the same. The bad thing that's happening, it may, whether it's a vulnerability or tampering, yes, is different, but the tracking and remediation is the same. So we really do need that tracking mechanism to go, this piece of software that hopefully I can discover in my environment has either been tampered with or it has a vulnerability. And in either case, one of my remediation steps, at least, is going to be, well, I need to update it. Right? I need to go to the next version, apply a patch, change the configuration. No, I may have to do, in Bill's world, a bunch of incident response to figure out what happened, right? But that's the case in any kind of incident.
Yeah, but the hard part there, Paul, and this has been true forever, is uh, you know, organizations can't always immediately update their software because of all the dependencies and the concern of, okay, if we update this one thing, what does it break? Which has been an excuse for a long time, but it's a reasonable concern for a lot of organizations. Of course, it doesn't excuse the fact that they never update. There should be something in place that's, they're testing and seeing what the impacts are. But I mean, I remember in the early days of me being out in the private sector, the beginnings of this whole cybersecurity thing, we used to recommend to companies that they didn't want to run on the latest version of anything because they were believed to be the buggiest parts of the software. Better to be one version back on everything because at least it was more reliable, more tried and true, and more battle tested. That went away somewhere along the line. I'm not sure when that shift happened, but it's not a simple let's just update the software for most organizations.
Yeah,
But I
it's
think
not.
that to get to a more secure state, that's where we need to be. Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it's not easy or possible to update software everywhere, but in those cases where it's not, you have to develop a mitigation plan, right? So like
Yep.
Right.
if that software is, I don't know, let's just say a vulnerable version of MySQL or whatever it is, then don't expose it to the internet, right? Like, so that doesn't fix the problem, but we have a mitigating factor there. And I don't agree with this at all. Like, so Paul, you mentioned, I do a lot of incident response,
Mm.
uh, and I mean, so if let's stay with that SQL Server example. If okay, so let's say that we've got a SQL Server on the internet and it keeps getting popped, it just keeps getting hacked. So is my plan to install an antivirus or an EDR on that, right? Because there's a vulnerable version of MySQL, or do I upgrade MySQL? Right. So malware to me is the second step in that chain, right? So how did they get that malware onto that system, right? So of course we still need to have those detection mechanisms, of course, because that a lot of times that's how we discover, oh shit, we have a vulnerable whatever sitting out there. So we have a vulnerable WordPress sitting out there. Nope, we didn't know, right? Of course we want that detection, but
Bill, you bring up a great point because in a lot of cases, when we look at supply chain attacks, Log4j, XZ, as log or SolarWinds, right? There was a point in time where that software had not been tampered with. Then the software was tampered with, and because I upgraded and took the next version, now I took the version that was tampered with.
yeah.
So some upgrading can bring me the tampered with version. I think what Reversing Labs is saying, because they Mario is awesome,
Yeah.
and they're a great company. I'm not knocking them in any capacity, but I'm basically reserving the right in our space and community today to say I disagree. Right? Doesn't mean you're a bad company or make a bad
Of course
product.
not.
Really,
Yeah.
we'll put that disclaimer on there because they do awesome work. But what I'm saying is, I think that they're like, we need to look at that update before it comes down and determine that if it's been tampered with or not, right? And we do similar things at Eclipsium, and this is in a space that I'm super excited about, right? Like, I want to upgrade, but when I look at that upgrade and go, has it been tampered with? That if we could figure that out on a global scale, we'd be in like such a better place in being more resilient, right? And I think a higher degree of confidence that you can give to operational teams, say you should update. And guess what? If an update that's coming down has been tampered with, we're going to tell you about it so you don't apply that. now we're in a beautiful situation. I think reading between the lines and knowing this, working in this space, that's what they're getting at.
Yeah, and that's probably, you're probably right, Paul. And I kind of want to go back to one of the things that Jeff said. So I've most of my career has been in extremely large enterprise, and there were the amount of times I heard the excuse we can't upgrade because of, and then insert excuse,
right.
man, like
it's basically operational risk, right? The excuse is something under the umbrella of operational risk.
That's why we have test environments, right? So, okay, apply the patch in the test environment. Let's see what breaks, and then go fix that, right? Because we've got to get past this part where you insert an excuse why we can't upgrade,
right? And but usually, I think more like you're somewhere on the maturity scale of in your SDLC, CI/CD pipeline, or maybe security, very much related in this context. And I've spoken with people who are super smart about building software and very securely. In fact, I think it was Chris Breton that told me that who was awesome. And he was describing scenarios where in the database is a good example. Like, hey, we built our application around this database on this version. Like, guess what? When there's a new version of that database, I don't just go apply that. I have a test environment. I drop that new version in the test environment, and then I regression test the crap out of it, and I observe everything. Because that version, and I'm not sure if it was advanced enough at the time when I was talking to Chris to go, like, had that version been tampered with? Right? Like, is this version all of a sudden somewhere in the code base of MySQL trying to reach out to the internet to go get something where it wasn't before?
right?
If you can get to that point, your test environment is not just for your own application, but validating, like, is that software doing something it should not, which is again, that's a hard problem to solve.
You don't necessarily need a test environment, though. All joking aside, like, every environment is a test environment. Some people have the luxury.
Yeah,
of having
like
a
my
separate
test environment was I would push
Right.
software out into production, and then I'd let the users find the problems. Like, isn't that a test environment?
So I kind of did something like that, leveraging a method that the CDC uses for testing out new medications and the like. So in the past, what I've done is profiled individual users based on the way they use the machines, the software that they have, the access that they need, and then would randomly select a certain number, a certain percentage of those individuals to roll out the patches to. Then I would have a communication methodology to basically check in with them, check their machines, make sure everything was running properly.
Call it like the ring method, right? Like you've got your internal, that's the internal ring, gets your first, and you monitor, and then you slowly.
I called it the guinea pig method, but it is what it is. But ultimately that worked really well because I would randomly select individual users. If I found an issue, I knew it was unique to an individual within that group of 3 or 5 people. And then once I knew it was stable, I could roll it out to the rest of the organization. It was a healthcare organization, and that appealed to them because they understood that methodology as well.
Right. I mean, I do that amongst friends. Have you heard of the Israeli nasal spray? I think it's called Enovid. Now I'm giving away my secrets, right? But I was talking to my friends, and they're like, dude, it totally works. Like, it's this nasal spray, and you order it from Israel, and you
with Bitcoin,
it kills like 99.9% of viruses. And I was like, I don't know. But then like I talk to my friends, and they're like, dude, like I totally went to Black Hat and DEF CON, and I did the stuff, and I didn't get the con flu or COVID or any of that stuff. And I'm like, oh, all right. Like, in your point, I'm like, you were my guinea pig. No, I'm going to try it. Right. And my wife thinks, and she works in healthcare, she thinks I'm absolutely batshit insane.
Yeah, you give it to 2 other friends and see if they die.
See if they die first. Right. Yeah.
Here, try this.
Somehow that's.
But now I'm basically one of the guinea pigs because, dude, I totally use it. And I don't know. But in my head, I feel better.
That's
right.
If it's transmissible, I'm part of that experiment now too.
That's right.
This is awesome.
No, I think that's
I saw a report last week that just putting Neosporin in your nose has been proven to lower your chance of getting infectious diseases.
Wow. And that's probably way cheaper than what I'm paying for this nasal spray.
Yeah.
It's probably better than cleaning fluids too. But
probably better than bleach. Yeah, I mean, you can just squirt bleach right up your nose. It's fine. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that.
Never do that.
Don't do that.
No, but that's an important thing, because I was gonna comment back to Bill, but not every organization has a test lab, even though they say they do. Mileage varies, but the idea of having a test case, having a small group of people to roll it out to, that's probably a good alternative if you don't have a full blown lab.
Yeah, like
Yeah, I
AliExpress, it's
agree.
Bill. I'm like, Bill, hey, did you see this cool thing on AliExpress? You should order that. Let me know how it goes. Does it work? Oh, good. I'll order mine now.
The side benefit of doing that too is it's more realistic than a lab environment too, because then you get to find out like the areas that can go wrong where the users actually use the new update.
Yes.
And then you find out more stuff. Like it has its risks, but I really like that model.
Oh, Sam, you and I both had the story about the UK law. It is the PTSI, Product Security and Telecommunications Infrastructure Act. And it was a version from 2022, but it took effect Monday, April 29th, basically banning bad passwords. I mean, well, that was how the press
and a bunch of other bad practices.
Yes,
really implementing a lot of good things.
The press did, I thought, a pretty bad job. I don't think did they actually read the law? I don't think they did. So I will hopefully enlighten everyone. So the new UK law, and again, this article says bans default passwords on smart devices, and that's a very sensational headline. What it actually says is that passwords must be unique per product or defined by the user of the product, which is something we've always pushed for. Passwords which are unique per product must not be based on incremental counters or derived from publicly available information or based on or derived from unique product identifiers such as serial numbers, unless this is done using an encryption method or keyed hashing algorithm that is accepted as part of good industry practice, otherwise guessable in a manner unacceptable as part of good industry practice. The part you could probably pick on is what's good industry practice. However, the rest of it, I think, is pretty sound, to be quite honest. And I think what they're basing this on, when I read this, I was like, yeah, I don't remember which vendor it was, but there was like Wi-Fi routers that would totally derive the default keys for the Wi-Fi network from the MAC address, right? I remember that. I don't know which. It was multiple ones that it happened to, and like based on that, like smart people wrote this law, like based on what we've observed in cybersecurity over the years, and I thought that was good. The other parts are manufacturer must provide a point of contact for reporting security issues. If ignored, could make devices exploitable by cyber criminals. The manufacturers must state minimum length of time for which the device will receive important security updates. I mean, these are the three basic concepts. Like good password practices, have a place where researchers can report vulnerabilities and you act upon them, and then state how long this device is going to be supported. To me,
more to it than
and
that,
it
though,
was
Paul.
not presented as,
They
I
also
think
put
this
some
is
teeth
a
in
really
it.
good thing.
If there's a device out there that doesn't meet the requirements, it can be recalled. And if they fail to comply, they can be fined up to 12.3 million, 10 million pounds, or up to 4% of, what is it, 10 million pounds or 4% of their something or their net worth, something like that. Gross annual income, thank you. And and
No,
the
the gross
EU is
annual
working on
income.
similar legislation, but that won't go
So it's
into
got
effect to
teeth.
27 at the soonest. But still, we need more of that.
Absolutely. How does that apply to something, so we were joking about AliExpress just a minute ago, but how does that apply if you order something from China?
It'll be illegal to market it in the UK. The vendor can be punished.
But enforcing. But I think Bill's point, and this has been a point of contention over the years, is how do you enforce that? Because China may just tell you to go pound sand and say, well, it's not a law in China, so
Well,
go pound sand.
I think it'll have to be taken down from like the Amazon website, right? For UK, nobody with a presence in the UK will be able to be responsible for selling it. You'd have to buy it directly from China if you can do that.
Oh,
Well, yeah, AliExpress is Alibaba,
Amazon has
Temu,
regional
all sites are
restrictions.
just, they're basically.
There's some things you can't buy.
It doesn't have. I think Alibaba has a U.S.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I think you're probably talking to like a regional branch of the company. This is what got FTX in trouble. They were doing illegal things and they knew it did it, so they kept it up. Binance kept it all out of America, but then they opened Binance US, and that's how they got in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Does the law allow for vendors to ship products with the null password?
With no password?
I think that's covered on good industry best practice.
And hopefully, force the consumer to set a password when they install it?
Yep, defined by the user of the product.
There's also an exception of some kind for products where the design doesn't make it possible to enter a password, things like that.
Yeah, usually that's less problematic and requires, I want to say that would require physical proximity, which lessens the likelihood of an attack. And I think the problem they're addressing is these IoT devices that are directly connected to the internet have these issues, right? Now, I don't know that the law specifically called out known exploitable vulnerabilities, but of course the EU CRA is harping on that point as well. But
I think the real expensive and deal-breaking part for companies is going to be item number 2, where they actually have to take vulnerability reports and do something with them. I've reported hundreds of vulnerabilities, and not even 1% of the companies do anything about it at all, or even have an answer. So I think that's what they really are not ready to do.
Well, that's
when and it wasn't clear to me. Like, also to your point, Sam. Sorry, Bill, but to your point, Sam. Like, what if it's shipped with a vulnerability, and then I report it? Like, can you remediate it and push out an update? And is that like part of the process, right?
Yeah, they have to not only have some place to report vulnerabilities, but they have to actually pay attention to them and deal with them.
But can they just say it's end of life?
Well, yeah, but they do have to tell you the lifetime when you buy the product.
Right.
If
Okay.
Still,
So they can't prematurely like, a lot of people are reporting vulnerabilities in this product, so let's just end of life it, and then we don't have to worry about it. So it does deal with that situation that they have to publish. This is when it's end of life, and within that time span, they have to comply with the credential part of the regulation and the reported vulnerabilities and respond to them within that time frame, which could work to a disadvantage. They could shorten that time frame so they're not responsible for those vulnerabilities. But I would like to see more kind of public research into here's the end of life for these products, and make purchasing decisions based on that end of life.
Me too.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. So was there any inclusion for the ability to upgrade firmware in that law? Right. So you mentioned, Paul, I mean, so yes, there was. You're saying
you're supposed to have an update process. Yeah.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Let's pass that here too.
And we will pass it. Just give us about 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I don't want it to impact is purchasing things for research purposes. Right? Like, it almost like there'd be a clause of like, yeah, you can sell it, but
yeah, it needs to be like a consumer good, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be for consumer goods that are actually used by consumers, not like I buy all kinds of random crap and I'm not using it in production. Like, it sits in my lab, or I mean, I buy Android phones and like I literally don't connect them to any Wi-Fi or cellular network because I'm like, I haven't validated the security of them yet, right? So you don't want to hinder the research component either, which is, regulations get really dicey on this kind of stuff.
Did you guys talk about TikTok last week?
We did not.
So
what's the state? What's the? But they call it the TikTok ban, but it's really not a ban. I mean, it could be a ban if the ownership doesn't change to a U.S. based company, which is
Yeah, I'm curious how you guys feel about this. And so, before I even make these comments, I just want to make sure that I clearly state that I do not have any information whatsoever. I didn't have a clearance after, a long time ago before TikTok even existed. So I don't have any insight to this. But the fact that we're even considering a ban tells me that there is some intelligence that is with strong enough evidence, that we should ban this. But I'm curious, are we still the home of the free, right? And how much babying do we need? And I'm curious how you guys feel about that. I'm such
yeah,
a
but I disagree. I don't think there's my opinion. And again, I'm like you, Bill. I have no inside information on this whatsoever. This is sheerly an opinion, but I don't think that we have inside information that TikTok in and of itself is doing anything more nefarious than any other app. I think it's a political play with China in the US, right? I think if they can give China a black eye in this case, it's a it's a bargaining lever political thing with China, right? Because there's apps and software written by every single country
yeah,
in
for
this
sure.
world that we could go start analyzing and go, what does it do? And I think it's just a political game at this point.
Well, it's political.
Well, the propaganda issue.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, sir.
Okay. Well, the propaganda issue is the one that I think holds the most weight. And unfortunately, when the studies show that people below 30, like they get their news from TikTok.
Mhm.
And the current Trump trial shows that a whole bunch of Americans actually get their news from a National Enquirer. So if that's going to be the situation, then, I mean, you could say, what do we do when people are going to be that stupid?
You're right, Sam. That's a larger issue of where people get news and what they believe. And I think that largely, my
Yeah.
opinion is people got lazy and they just want to believe it and go with it, and because that's the easiest to consume, and
Yeah,
therefore
but
that's
Well,
what we're going to believe.
but
And
even
the
if
Trump
it
trial is a great example. Like,
yeah.
if you don't dig into like the details, like you're just going with what you feel and what you believe about, whether you like people
It's
or
supposed
not
to be
like
an easy
people, and
process
it
too.
being fed to you is you're either on one side or the other. And if they're feeding you stuff because you like Trump or you don't like Trump, like that's what
Yeah,
you're just gonna
you're right
believe, and
on
it
that.
just becomes a game. And most of us, like hackers in the community, are like, well, what's the real story, and how do I figure out what's really going on? And the answer isn't usually a binary 0 or 1, right? The answer is like somewhere in between. So I don't know. Myself, I
but
listened to like a whole 3-hour podcast interview with someone who was an attorney on Trump's team and informed my own opinions, right? And I read other articles. And again, I believe in that situation is a great example of like, I don't know, like the answer is somewhere in between. But you can sway people on social media, and that could be one of the driving factors behind the government going, "Oh, we don't want TikTok having influence over people like this."
I think it has to do with the way we consume information now as well. Those of us, who were all on this podcast, you remember a time before the internet. We used to have to go and get information. We had to go to a place, it was called a library, I believe,
Mm.
in order to find the things that we wanted. We had to search through a bunch
Or
of
get a
stuff.
newspaper delivered to us, and we had to read it.
Or the supermarket
Phone
checkout
books.
stand where you get the Enquirer.
I have an upcoming talk where I'm planning on wrapping a phone book in just like black paper and dropping it on the stage and seeing how many people in the audience know what that sound is.
Mhm.
Anyway, right now, like overall culturally, we are much more used to having information fed to us that's already sort of predetermined as to what the outcome is. And I think it's not necessarily like using the term lazy is a little bit lazy. I would say our tastes have shifted to be we are expecting the information that we need to be sent to us in the form that we need it, and we're accepting that as truth. We're also accepting how we feel about something as truth because it is somewhat uncomfortable to challenge a preconceived notion, and to challenge our biases, which is a habit you have to develop. Like even for the best of us who are trained at doing this, that is a hard thing to maintain. It's like exercising. It's not something well, some people wake up and naturally go and exercise comfortably. I am not one of those people. But the same thing with challenging your bias. You have to actively do it.
Yeah, no, I
But
agree.
Paul, I mean, you're raising a
Fuck that. I love my bias.
you're raising a good point, Paul.
Bill just goes with his bias, right?
Just feels good.
Well, and unfortunately, that's what most people do. But it goes back to what we've talked about many times over the years on the show, where the fundamental problems, number one is passwords and authentication. Number two is trust issues. I see this as a trust issue. We're at a political level, let's say, we're trusting the American owned companies that do the exact same thing we know they do in terms of capturing data and putting out perhaps misleading messages. But the idea that it's a declared enemy from a national security perspective, that, in this case being China, that's where we have to draw the line and say we don't trust that.
Right.
At a political
From a
level,
U.S. government perspective, though, it's a trust and control issue as
Yeah.
well. Maybe they feel like they can't control a Chinese-based company, whereas they can bring in Mark Zuckerberg and make him testify before Congress. Right? It makes them feel better about it, but whatever.
He got a new hairstyle recently. He's glowed up.
But I agree with you. I mean, they're all doing it, and we as citizens and consumers should be suspecting everybody. But we tend to like to trust the ones that are on our side in theory, and we're okay
but
with
still,
that.
we should verify and then trust.
Yeah, but we don't do that. I mean, that has been proven, and I don't know if there's any way to change the habits and the practices of citizens and people. I mean, yeah, some small group of people, like the hacker community, are going to be a little bit more questioning and want to get to the facts, get to the what's the other side of the story, what's really happening here. Most people don't do that, won't do that. I don't see them ever doing that, and that presents a problem.
And I think a great example of that is my story number 17. I don't know if you folks saw this, but there was a school athletic director arrested for framing a principal using AI voice synthesis. So, and this happened in Baltimore County, Pikesville High School. You familiar, Jeff? Are you anywhere near Pikesville High School?
Yeah, I am aware of Pikesville. Yes.
So Pikesville High School's former athletic director they was charged with using AI to impersonate the principal of the school. So they used the software to simulate the principal's voice, leading the public to believe that the principal made racist and anti-Semitic comments. And people believed it. I mean, people were like, again, they just trusted, they didn't verify. And they were like, oh my God, the principal made these horrible, racist statements. And then it came out that was completely fake and generated using AI, which brings up a whole host of issues with not just trust, but also the usage of AI and how we validate AI generated content versus not.
Well, I mean, I had a similar experience. It happened to me twice. That we mentioned in the first segment that I have a cipher wheel that I invented, designed back in the late '80s, and it was used by special forces, and now is in a museum. But twice I've been challenged on, well, the wooden version that you have, Paul. I don't know if you have it handy. You can hold it up.
I do.
The guy that made that replica, he got his information for that wheel from someone that was former special forces. That is, from what I understand, I don't know the guy's name, but from what I understand, he was a colonel in the military, worked with special forces, now teaches at one of the war colleges, wanted to preserve the history, went to that group or that guy that makes those wooden replicas, and that site to this day advertises the wheel as being Vietnam era. And I've been challenged twice on how do I know that you're the one that invented it in the 80s? This website says it's Vietnam era. And I'm like, well, I don't know exactly how to prove it other than, like, I have the prototypes in my possession, and hopefully now that the fact that it's in a museum,
yeah.
Hopefully holds
Squashes
some
that.
credence. But the one of the people that questioned, well, how do I believe you? And I had presented him the pictures and the certificates that I got from presenting the wheel at the Special Forces Association conference last year. He's like, well, what does this mean? It could be anything. I sent the guy today pictures of the wheel being on display in the museum. Hopefully that'll provide some evidence.
Right.
But I'm like, how do
what does it take to do that verification in order
Right.
to trust? Is your point, Jeff? Yeah, it's a great.
Yes.
And it's a great point. Yeah.
I have one data point. So when you talked about that, one of the last times I was on the show, I sent an explanation and the story behind that wheel to my dad, who went through crypto school during Vietnam. He had never seen anything like that. So that's one person who went through crypto school. I mean, they had him working on the Enigma machines in order to understand those and a few other things, punch card based encryption and some other stuff. But he thought it was really cool. They didn't have anything near that. They had far worse technology.
And Jeff, you're making me nervous putting that special bottle like right on the windowsill behind you, dude. Like I feel like that should be in a glass case, like somewhere on your mantle. Like you should put the bourbon in get one of these decanters, dude, on Amazon for like $11.99. I think is what I paid for this decanter on Amazon.
Right.
Put the bourbon in there, and then take that bottle and put it in a glass case somewhere in your.
I'll do it.
Mantle.
It's safe for now. I'm being very.
You're making
careful.
very good progress, Jeff. Your friend who is asking that you've finished that halfway should be very proud.
I'm working.
I'm making good progress on this, Elijah Craig. Can I have another ice cube so I can make more progress?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's very good
Sam.
bourbon, by the way. If you can get a bottle of this Tobacco Barn Distillery bourbon, highly recommended.
Well, Lee, I'd like to hear about your story number 8. This one, I think.
Oh, sorry, Lee. I didn't see that. Sorry, Sam. I didn't see that Lee had stories in there.
He's got the Kaiser Permanente one, and I think there's real experts here. I'd like to hear what you people think of this one.
The what now?
Kaiser Permanente data breach, or at least that's what the headline says. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah. So, Kaiser Permanente has a breach affecting about 13.4 million users, basically from their web trackers that were releasing extra information when they were in their mobile app and in something else. Anyway, you get all that web analytics from them, but they actually have access to a bunch of other data in the browser, and shockingly, it was Harvest. And my thinking is that hey guys, be careful on these trackers because they can get other information, and I actually found a link that's in my show notes to the guide from HHS on using HIPAA sites and trackers. And in fact, I would say anybody looking at using trackers should check that out, because there's things to think about. Whether you got HIPAA data or not, you got to be aware and you got to make the case of what these things can do. And oh, by the way, how many of us have put a tracker on a site for fun and then never looked at the results?
Yeah, I run, and I don't know how much it blocks, but I do run the EFF Privacy Badger, which pledges to block trackers, which I think is a good Chrome or browser plugin.
But I mean, I think nobody knows this. Like the second half of your summary here says 98% of health websites have trackers. I mean, I think if this has to be reported as a breach, it's going to send a huge shockwave through the industry, because everybody just makes a normal website the way everybody does, and now suddenly that's considered unsafe.
The norm. Well, yeah.
Right.
And then
they
it's
look for the padlock, right? They look for some sort of the padlock, or I'm safe, but they don't think about.
They don't look at third party cookies. Google was thinking about blocking third party cookies by default, and then kind of backed off that whole thing.
But who would call that a breach? I mean, this really seems to change the whole meaning. Is that really legally a breach, just to put like a Google Analytics cookie on your site?
So what happened?
My initial reaction was no. I was listening to this. I was like, that's when you're breached, it generally implies that it's information that you are holistically responsible for, that is within the confines of your environment. This is
what people say is, if you were to use the search engine and type in a query, the query you type in might possibly go to Google or Facebook or something now because of the tracker. And maybe that's true, if that's a breach, then basically everybody has to like take down their health websites and remake them, all of them.
I hold this like in the same category in my mind where websites publish information that they probably shouldn't, like in the code, and then say, "Oh, you looked at the code, you hacked the website. We're mad about that." To me, it's the equivalent. This is essentially similar. They're generating metadata that then can be used to correlate with an individual. I think that that opens up a whole new classification of things that we just don't have rules for. At least not that I've heard. There may be rules and I'm breaking them, but
well, there used to be rules. We've ignored them.
Names, we got IP addresses, we got their navigation history. Again, limited, but if you get into things like GDPR or CCPA, those are privacy things, and I think that's why they hit the HIPAA reporting on it. Which then, I still think the good that can come out of this, like Sam says, is to revisit those damn trackers and what they're revealing. I mean, do we really need to share with anybody else what users you have accessing your website?
Yeah, I don't understand why a health organization would have a direct legitimate use for that. I would love to talk to somebody who does.
I think they just hire a normal web designer that just puts the normal stuff up there, and they expect to be able to answer like demographic questions, how many viewers of this age, how many viewers from that country, and nobody ever thought that that was a breach.
I completely agree.
But those tracking cookies, if they don't have the right filters on them or whatever, is more than just like kind of an anonymous who, but more specific who, because more like shady organizations that want to know exactly where Paul visits, what websites Paul visits and what his shopping habits are. But there's also legitimate uses where you want to know the persona of who accesses your, like, and I've always felt this about Security Weekly, right? Like, we're like 19 years into it, and I'm like, look, I don't want to know who you are, but I kind of want to know, in an anonymous sense, who's visiting the website, who's listening to the podcast, because that's something that can help us monetize. So I want to know the general persona. I don't want to know that it's Bill and what other websites Bill. I want to know that someone with this title working in this industry listens to the show or visits the website, right? Like, that's the kind of non-shady usage for it. Well, shady usage is I'm tracking that individual, exactly where they go, and I'm harvesting that data.
Well, what I'm hearing.
Well, then take a look at my number
7.
Well,
before we move on to 7, what I'm hearing is what we used to call big data, back in maybe the teens, where
that was like a big RSA thing. There was a big data thing.
But the idea that grocery stores, department stores, they pay attention to what you're buying, and then next week you get a coupon. Ooh, I get a coupon, or it spits out from the cash register. But the idea that I'm buying, all sorts of medications and treatments that could logically be deduced as, oh, he's got some kind of disease, or I'm Google searching chlamydia or something like that. I don't think breach is a good term for it, but it's certainly information disclosure, information leakage, which, I mean, I had
speaking of leakage, like, I bought a bidet toilet seat and somehow the tracking cookies were like, and I've talked about this on the show before, like, Paul likes a really clean butt. And dude, even still to this day, some of the advertisements I see, like for AliExpress or like some of these other sites, I'm like, what is that? And where does it go? And what does it do? And it's all because, like, I bought some bidet toilet seats from Amazon.
Oh, I misunderstood you. The toilet seat is not smart, sending data to the internet itself.
No, it's my shopping. It's the tracking cookies kind of track that back to me, that I bought the insert for the toilet seat that cleans your butt. And they're like, oh, well, Paul must really like clean butt. So then I see like a shower head attachment that, I mean, I have screenshots. I'll send them to you later, Sam.
Do you know
of your clean butt? No, thank you.
No. Of the devices that.
He's really proud.
I had to Google. I'm like, what is that? How does?
Do you know for a fact that it's not connecting to the internet? Have you checked?
Yes, I have actually taken it apart. And when you have boys, their aim is not great, so you have to take apart the toilet seat and all the clean it, and there's
Got it.
definitely, if there was electronics, they're definitely dead by now.
Transmitting those signals through the
Got
hot water line
electrolytes.
didn't work.
But
Oh boy.
but I mean, it does underscore the fact that this information technology internet age has introduced a whole new way of thinking about what's private data. We used to know
Yeah.
what it was. It was
But
name,
I hate
address,
the,
phone
like,
number.
if you've talked about something thing,
Yep.
and if you've solved this problem, other than like being like on the super paranoid spectrum where you don't run Android or iOS, right? But like, we've all done this. We've all talked to our friends and family. You talk about something and then you see the ads.
Yep.
If you solve that problem, like how do you need to go to great lengths to turn that off? Because it's still a thing.
I mean,
I don't.
disable your speaker, disable your microphone physically would be a good start in order to troubleshoot that.
Yeah, but you can't do that on like commodity gear. You can't do that. The ultra privacy gear that's marketed towards the ultra privacy people, you can turn all that stuff off, right?
Well,
like on my framework laptop, like I can turn off the camera and microphone like right from the like physical switches, right? And so you see like Pine phones and stuff like that. Sure, but like if I bought a phone from Google, how do I make it not listen to what I'm saying?
Get a pin, destroy that microphone, like physically destroy it, fill it with super glue, something like that.
That's not practical either.
But then it's not a
I
phone.
I have a practical usage for the microphone.
Well, the recommendation is to then, when you want to use it as a phone, to physically plug in something to it that then is your microphone. So you don't have a microphone when you don't need a microphone. Therefore, it's no longer a listening device.
Yeah, the average citizen is not going to do that.
Exactly. Everybody's risk profile is different. The lengths that they will go to. Right. That's fair.
Well, the old answer used to be, if you don't want it listening to you, take it out of the room. The problem is we're tethered to the damn things these days because of all the other crap that's going on.
I've got a smart watch, hello, okay.
Let's try that risk.
Mm-hmm.
Free money. That's what my daughter always says. Free money. Hasn't worked yet.
Release the hounds.
Is that a bumper sticker?
So Lee, you were hinting towards your story number 7, which is along these lines. The FCC fines carriers $200 million for illegally sharing user location. I did see references to this. I didn't read it, mostly because the privacy stuff. I don't know. Right. It's not my focus, but I'm glad you brought it up because I think it's relevant.
So what I mean, the carriers are saying, wait a minute, it's the data brokers that sold it, but then again, they changed what they were when they were accused of releasing too much information. They changed what they were selling. This is still not done. By the way, it's 200 million in total. It's like 60 million to Verizon, 30 million to T-Mobile.
Yeah, dropping the bucket. I don't know how much that really hurts the major carriers, though, right?
Yeah, they're probably making more than that, and so I'm
making more than that in any given week, month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I worked for so I've worked for both Sprint and T-Mobile, and I was not part of the cellular side, but what we had a portal where that was when it was built, and so this was a long time ago, but when it was built, it was to be shared with law enforcement only to be able to track a phone. Mm-hmm. And what I heard over time is that and generally speaking, back when it was built, it was only to be used for. So first it had to be law enforcement, and then it had to have a search warrant or some sort of
gotta have a warrant.
Compelled, some compelled action. But from what I heard is over time it grew into a paid portal. You pay pay $20 or whatever it was, and then you do your search for your investigation and you're out. Again, it's supposed to be for law enforcement only, but this truly became a profit center, right? So,
but in the context of criminal law, Bill, if let's just say, hypothetically speaking, I'm a law enforcement agent and I go pay $20 and I find that I get the location and I make an arrest. When I go to court, that case is getting thrown out because I didn't have a warrant, right? So like criminal cases, they have to have a warrant, right? But now we're talking about is other very dangerous situations, quite frankly, outside of a law enforcement investigation. And I'm not saying you're law enforcement or not, but like crazy people that like want to find people and do harm. It's a safety issue at that point. It's also really like a creepy thing too, where you can be tracked.
Yeah, have you guys ever gone to some of the data broker sites and actually paid the $1.99 for a report? Like, have you ever paid the $1.99? It's shocking the amount of information that you get back. Social
your
security
location
numbers.
is like it's not a secret anymore, right? Like you can just go to your Google account and you're like there's like a link that Tyler sent me for like your Google account, right?
Yeah, your history.
And you go there and you're like, holy shit, that's like all the places I've been in the past 10 years, dude. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of like that whole Google thing is so interesting for me because I've had over time, I'm very privacy conscious. No, I think it's cool because you know, and so like right now, I think it's cool because I like to go back and see how much of the world have I seen, right?
Yes.
But then there's sections of time where I was very privacy conscious. And you know, so I'm missing those.
So you you do have some control over your location tracking within Google, right? You can hide it.
Yeah, you can
if you put the time and effort into doing it, you can. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
But there shouldn't be that much effort to be put into it, quite frankly. I guess I'm okay with the like user opt-in, opt-out. I've always said this when we've talked about privacy in the past 19 years of the show. I'm totally fine with all the tracking things as long as the user can clearly understand what they're signing up for and say yes or no.
Right.
Like totally fine. Like, and I'm even okay with like, let's talk about car insurance companies. If you want to opt in and be like, yes, you can get the telemetry from my car and you can use, if you opt into that, totally fine with it, right? You can't do it. Consent is a huge thing. If you don't have consent, you can't do it. Like there has to be this full privacy. To me is about full transparency because there are benefits if you voluntarily share information and you want the benefit. I'm okay with that. The problem today is a lot of that shit is like swept under the rug, and that's the problem
is that, you know, they call it the tyranny of the default or whatever, right? And so if you default it on, even if you have the opt-out capability, that you know what, there 1% of people, you know, will opt out unless people become aware of it, right? You know, like you know, and then once people start being asked the question, like when Apple started doing when they changed, do you want to be tracked or not, right? On, and you know, and surprisingly, everybody said no to that, like, you know, but I really like the way that Apple handles that. You know, it's kind of upfront.
I do too. Like, I think Apple, in terms of big companies, dude, they're the best at managing that.
Well, I mean, it's as simple as opt in or opt out.
Yep.
Well, what if you can't opt out anymore, or it's not really the difficulty in opting out is so high that
no, I agree. It has to be there can't be too many barriers to the opt out.
So
totally agree. Right.
So it used to be you could get an OBD2 thing that you could plug into your car that has cellular connection. The insurance provider would potentially give you a
now discount. Your car's just connected without. I
just bought a brand new Prius, and it while I was walking through the sign up process, there was a thing, and it basically lumped in a feature combined with, do you want to give us access to monitor the usage of your vehicle to like give you to then send it to your insurance provider. It was a completely voluntary thing that they were bundling with a feature that I could have used potentially. I opted out, but like the average user probably would just say yes to that, just like a EULA, you know.
Same thing with my wife's new Lexus. It had the same thing. I caught that and I said no. But if you're going to help the user experience and our feedback, and we're going to do better research.
Well, it's the same thing with like the cameras and stuff in the Tesla. Like, do you want it constantly like recording, and are you going to be compelled or forced to share that stuff? And I'm like, do I really want the footage of me like, you know, pedal to the floor, you know, blowing people off the line? I don't want that going anywhere. Like, no, turn it off. Turn it off.
Data. 190 billion frames a day of Tesla data coming in.
Wow.
And they're using it to train their self-driving module.
Which is still crap, by the way.
I'm waiting
My
for the
assessment.
day.
So my
dude, I've tested it recently, and it's still pretty crappy.
my Prius actually performs better than the standard driving functions that I had on my Tesla, because I never got the full self-driving package, because I was like,
Yeah, I didn't either,
know.
but they gave everyone a free 30-day trial recently.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, I'm glad I didn't buy that or pay for it, because it's horrible. Although I still have the parking feature, which works great. But that's not like that's not like anything new. Like, we've had cars that can self-park for like a really long time. So
yeah, I was taken aback when I bought this thing day one. I'm trying out all the capabilities. It has a couple of different functions for self-parking, and it's tunable, so you can tell it to like be a bit riskier in getting close to the sidewalk as it's backing in. It works really well. And you can also adjust like the projected place it's going to park on the screen. I was impressed. I wasn't expecting it to be nearly as good as it was.
yeah, self-parking is I think it's a pretty good problem that they solved with that. Like, yeah,
except when you annoy people behind you because they don't realize that you're putting your car.
I freak people out too, because I'll have like my hands behind my head. I'm just sitting there, and people are looking at me, and the car's parking itself, and they're just looking
Smoking
like, what
cigar.
is going on?
Smoking
No,
are you allowed to use that feature when your 16-year-old's doing his driving test?
No, you cannot. You have to turn all that stuff off when they take the driving test.
I mean, I'm happy.
My son is in driver's ed right now, and when I teach him how to drive, none of the electronics are in play. And this goes back to my nephew too. Anytime I've taught anyone how to drive, I'm like, you get no cameras, you get no nothing, no assistance. Like, if I could teach you in like a classic car that has no electronics, that's what I would teach you in, because you need to learn how to drive before you use any of that stuff.
And
which is
manual
very telling
transmission, if they still make cars.
Manual transmission.
I would teach everyone the manual transmission. I think it does make you a better driver.
It makes you more engaged.
Yeah. You're more in tune with the car. I agree, but
what I'm waiting for.
But then you can't text. Like it really.
No, you can't do anything else. I remember when I had a Mini Cooper. It was a 6-speed. Fairly recently, in my lifetime, and I was like, it kind of sucks because like I can't like
fairly
I can't be like scrolling through podcasts, like sipping a coffee kind of thing, like while I'm driving. Like, when I was driving that, like, I had to drive. Like, this thing wants to be driven, and I need to be in tune with that, and I can't be doing anything else. Like, forget about that's why I like my truck, because I can just get in, I can like smoke a cigar and drink some coffee. With a manual transmission, you're not smoking a cigar and drinking coffee while you're driving without being like really like, you get to your destination, you're literally like tired from you like using your brain that much, right?
I did okay. I had a Triumph Spitfire, which had a ashtray right in the center of the dash, right under where the windshield was. So cigar would be there.
No, dude, like
coffee was there.
Dude, I grew up in the 90s, and more people had standards, and like a lot more people smoked cigarettes, and I would watch people like smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, driving a manual transmission, and I feel you should get a badge. Like, it's a badge.
Put this between your fingers and on the stick shift.
Right? Exactly. Yeah, there's a way to do it.
I think
I don't know
how
did we get this far down the rabbit hole?
Yeah, Paul. I think it's neat that you can do that.
Before we get out of the rabbit hole, I've always been surprised, and I'm still waiting for the day. In the old days, it was the GPS, like the Garmin's that you could buy for your car. Nowadays, everybody's got the phone. But the fact that the GPS tracks your speed, I've always wondered why somebody hasn't sold that data to insurance companies.
Oh, they do.
To help influence the premiums that you pay for insurance. Oh, no, they totally do. Speed.
But more importantly, in the Tesla, the screen is right in the middle of the car, and it puts the speed limit and your speed, so everyone in the car can see it. And my kids yell at me all the time, Dad, you're going like 40 miles an hour over the, but they do the math in their head. I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, keep doing math. It's good for your brain. Like, that's good. But also, like, stop yelling at me. I'm driving. Like, get out of the way.
Yeah.
I just won that race. Like, stop.
Don't interrupt me. I'm 40
I'm
miles
driving.
over the speed limit.
Stop distracting me.
Yeah.
But to bring it back, Paul, to the original topic, which was,
what was the original topic?
All this data that's collected that is not necessarily what we would have considered privacy data a generation ago. Just as a footnote or a mental note, in the next month or two, when we're talking about encryption, we need to talk about homomorphic encryption, because homomorphic encryption is the solution, quote unquote, where all the data
it's a solution. It's not the solution. It's a solution.
That's why I did the air quotes. But the idea of homomorphic encryption is that all that data that's being collected is protected because it's encrypted, but you're still able to
perform operations,
all this useful demographic type of data off of it. Right. I don't, as a cryptographer, I'm like, when you encrypt data, you're not supposed to get any useful information about it.
Agreed.
But there are companies out there that are promoting that, and it's it was a big thing 2 or 3 years ago, and it's kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit, but it's still out there. It's still a thing.
Well, I think
I do want to talk about it.
I do want to make sure we check the box on the Flipper Zero for this week, because last week we didn't talk about Flipper Zero, which kind of broke my streak of like 4 or 5 episodes in a row talking about the Flipper Zero. And this week I have the Flipper Zero Dazzler IR Blaster expansion board that was available on Tindy. And let's see if my prediction is correct. It might be nope. There's still 7 left in stock, which hopefully after this episode airs, there will be 0 left in stock.
There's about to be 6
after I make my pitch, because yes, I bought one. In this is Bill. You and I and Larry talked about shenanigans. Like, this is solely like in the category of shenanigans, right? Like, I think the reason I bought one, and it's not the only one that I have, by the way, and the challenge is just to see like how far away I can be from IR devices and mess with them. And then like also the other kind of challenge is like, how many can I mess with at once? This is it's like a personal challenge of mine. And I've bought many of the IR blaster boards, and this one was really promising because it kind of has the like circular design and claims to, let's see, it says open area distance is 100 meters, which is 328 feet. And I'm like, add to cart. Like, I have to have, so Paul, I have to have this.
Paul, you're approaching MERT territory there.
Yes.
When you get this, I want you to try out and see if you can pop some street lights with that, or some stoplights with that.
Like, this has some promise. So it's equipped with 32 high intensity infrared LEDs to project a focused beam of IR light. The strategic placement of these LEDs along with the optical lens optimizes performance for a stronger signal. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so like completely sold on this. I can't wait. And like, if you have a Flipper Zero, you need at least one of these infrared like expansion boards. I have like 6, but like, like, I think they're so cool.
You just sold me. I'm buying one too.
Because dude, when you're in an environment and there's like tons of TVs, we've all been in the bars and the hotels and wherever it is, and you're just like, oh, I wish I could just like turn off and on these TVs like all at once. I mean, and these add-on boards for the Flipper allow you to do that. And I'm like, I can't not have this capability.
I don't think you necessarily. I think this is overkill. I mean,
no, it's totally overkill.
It's really cool that they're lensed.
It should be called the IR overkill board.
Yeah,
for sure.
These are each of those LEDs is actually lensed, which I appreciate. It was a little bit skeptical that it was going to be focused in some way, but they have a legit lens.
What do you mean by lens? Like
it looks like a concave lens.
So I see. So it's curved to to emit the light in more of a
directional manner.
Okay, yeah.
So this is nostalgic to me. When I was 10, I designed an IR grenade. Basically, it was programmed to run through like a few different standard TV power off codes. I never actually built it, but it was built on this similar logic, where it had a reflector in the back of it to try and get a similar effect. But I had does anybody remember the Casio remote control watches? Anybody? Okay, I was not.
I think I remember I read something.
I was never cool, so I had one of these in order to try to be cool. So I had one of those, and it actually did a really good job. You could actually go into a sizable restaurant and turn off basically all the TVs
with a Casio watch.
With a Casio watch,
and this was pre TVB Gone.
This, way before. This is 2000.
I love this.
So
this was like
the Flipper
Casio
Zero
watch.
is just a knockoff of the Casio watch. Is what I'm
basically.
I mean, basically, there's a progression here, right? Casio watch, TVB Gone. Who created the TVB Gone? Was it Adafruit or was it
Mitch
Travis
Altman,
Goodspeed?
Mitch
Altman.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Really nice dude.
Thank you. Mitch Altman created the TVB Gone. But and I did this with my oldest son to teach him how to solder. I was like, because he sees me with the flipper, like turning stuff off with infrared. He's like, oh, that's really cool. I'm like, dude, back in the day, we had to like buy all the parts and we had to solder it together. And he was like, really? I'm like, let's do it together. And I had a TVB Gone kit that I hadn't soldered yet. And I'm like, dude, we took turns, and soldered it all together. And we went to the TV in the living room and we turned it on and off. And it was so much more like satisfying and gratifying to go, like we looked at each other and we're like, dude, like we built this thing, soldered it together, and then was able to do that. And the flipper kind of cheapened that a little bit because you can just buy the device and do it, and then like go buy something off Tindy and do it. But like I strongly encourage that you go solder something together because it gives you that gratification,
Yeah, Mitch Altman came to Rhode Island about 15 years ago, and he brought a bunch of those. Really nice dude.
I think that's where I got one.
Probably. Yeah. It's been sitting there for 15 years. Wow.
Hell yeah. So every Flipper Zero owner should own at least one or 6 of these.
Have you kept up with the patching and the upgrades?
I bought one, but Paul, where was my discount code?
I know I don't have any discount codes for it, but it's only $29 for that board. I think is a fair price.
Noise.
Because look, again, having soldered a TVB Gone together, knowing how much work that is, whoever soldered these boards together, I don't know if he outsourced that to a PCB place or whatever, or is soldering himself. It's a pain in the butt to solder that board together. So,
well, Paul, you should be satisfied that when this is actually aired, the inventory should be snatched up.
It's down to like 4 now,
but that's just us.
It's just I think we snapped up 3 of his inventory, and there was 7. So now it's dwindling.
Can we talk about the old worm?
Can we? I wish I had read this article. I ran out of time. And I loved the headline for it. What story number was that, Dave?
Millions of IP.
No, NVMe, D-Link, WordPress,
Control F, worm.
14.
Yeah, 14 millions of IPs remain infected by USB worm years after its creator left it for dead. This was a Dan Gooden Ars Technica article that for some reason I didn't read this week.
So I was reading through first of all, I got excited by the headline. I'm like, okay, this is going to be an ancient piece of malware. It's only 5 years old, or
it became active in 2019.
Yeah,
when a variant of malware known as Plug X added functionality that allowed it to infect USB drives automatically.
So I'm surprised.
Oh, so like traditional USB malware, like I'm on a computer. You plugged in a USB drive, I'm going to infect that USB drive, and then any computer you plug that USB drive into is going to infect the other computer. Like, God, that's old tech, obviously.
I was talking with some guys at South by Southwest this year about another talk that I went to at B-Sides, and we were talking about malware history and so on and so forth. And we were theorizing the possibility of malware that's circulating on the internet that has that only affects a couple of machines that are just completely unpatched against it. And I'm wouldn't be surprised if somebody dedicates a significant portion of their research time to something like this. But I was really
like
happy to see this
dead
example.
worms and viruses is
Yeah.
the reason why the headline caught my attention was I was like, oh, because there must be a whole ton of like dead malware out there.
There's got
right.
be.
They like still infects machines, to your point, Dave, but no one's controlling it. Like it's kind of like abandoned. It's kind of like almost like abandoned buildings. You guys follow like the abandoned building exploration social media channels?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think some of it's kind of fake, right? Like I watched some of them and I'm like,
they totally got permission.
Yeah, like shenanigan kind of things, right, are going on. Right, they got permission, and
they're pretending they don't.
Exactly.
Like I've done that with my kids, no permission, like
just like let's go explore this building. I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like in Providence, there's we call it the Superman
temple.
building.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's not that sketchy. Also, they're rebuilding it.
It's a little sketchy.
Sketchy would be the lad school.
It's various stages of sketchy over time, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
So there's like a big skyscraper in Providence. Well, in Providence terms,
relatively
big. Relatively speaking, to Jeff's point,
like jumbo
right?
shrimp.
And we call it the Superman building. But what was it? Was it Fleet Bank?
It was
back in the day.
Several different banks, yeah.
And then it was like abandoned, and then it was too expensive to renovate, was the story that I got from some people.
Yeah.
And then people explore it, but also there's security guards inside of it, like guarding certain parts of it, which just breeds like investigation. Like, why are there people guarding certain parts of it? And then we just go all conspiracy theory, like, oh, it's the mafia has, meth labs in it or something, right?
That would make a great punk band.
So Paul, challenge, let's broadcast an episode from this building in weeks.
Let's go.
Let's go explore it. I can probably swing that. Yeah, I know some people.
I mean, dude, it's right there. I mean, it's right there in Providence. I mean, the worst case is we get arrested for whatever. But
do you have any mafia connections that we can use?
No comment.
Oh, there we go. There we go. And we're set.
You'll know in a couple weeks when Paul's broadcasting from the building.
Right.
No, let's see if we can put some effort into that. I mean, Rhode Island's a really small place. You can get a lot done.
But I would, before we step foot on that, I would like to do. It's an interesting kind of research project. Right. I don't know how we got there from malware to
just to go back to malware.
Off on another tangent.
Archaeology. Malware archaeology is something like
building archaeology, malware archaeology.
There's two profound things here. One, that would be an entirely new area of science and research and so on. And two, that implies that something is old enough.
But I don't know that it's new, but because I think many of us have kind of run across C2 channels that have been abandoned, malware that's been abandoned. I mean, and you see reports about like SQL Slammer worm is still running around. Like there's no threat actors controlling like a SQL Slammer worm anymore, right? But like it's still out there. I don't know what today it looks like. I mean, I want to say maybe 5 years ago we covered a story that was like, oh, SQL Slammer is like still a thing.
Is the Morris worm still out there?
That
here it is. I'd love to know.
No, the Morris worm source code was available.
Mm-hmm.
That was a story. I could like I don't know if it's open. They open sourced the code to the. You could get the Morris worm code.
I mean, when did we start defaulting to malware? Because in the early days it was viruses, Trojans, worms. We had descriptive terminology for what is collectively known as malware.
It got too complicated to try.
It got too complicated.
Yeah, it was just insane.
Like, it's not a worm, man. It's not a worm.
Cryptographic. And then it was like, oh, it's not cryptographic. Yeah. It's not self-replicating. It's not cool.
Yeah.
But in this case, like this to me implies that like now there's like potential for archaeology here. That now implies that cybersecurity is old enough to have somebody apply the concepts of archaeology towards it.
Right.
Which makes me in turn feel very old. But it is cool to think about the history and like whenever I hear a good talk on the history of malware, I usually learn about something that was happening around me at the time that I wasn't aware about, but and then still have that nostalgia fix of, oh yeah, the Morris worm. Like I had a copy of that. That was kind of fun, to mess with on your lab and your
Morris worm code you can find online. And also MS DOS source code was a version, but there was a very specific version because over time, MS DOS 4 source code has been posted by Microsoft, but not five. Although, I think you can find nefarious sources that give you the MS DOS 5 source code, but officially so this is Tom's Hardware article, MS DOS 4.0 code binaries, disk images, and documentation is now available. And I think I had a story about how not to release open source code. I saw that article.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, right?
So you have to be old enough to remember
it was
when
shit.
You booted a computer to an operating system and you launched a GUI, a graphical user interface, aka Windows.
Yep. The other thing that's interesting to me is people picking up old viruses, old malware that are abandoned and starting to use them again. That would be interesting. I know it's happened a few times in a short term where a certain type of virus will be abandoned for a few months and then picked up by a different group. But it'd be really cool to see somebody also, potentially bad. I will caveat that somebody pick up something that's years old and then start using it again, sort of hipsterize it and start making it cool again.
Hipster malware, man.
Hipster
malware.
Cool. You heard it here first.
Yeah. So who would, Miko that would have been a good topic for Miko. I bet he would know that.
Yeah, no, he's definitely got a stockpile of really cool malware that he's accumulated over years. Yeah. He's got some stuff he probably hasn't talked about. We should have brought that. We were talking about ransomware and stuff with him on the show, but we should totally have him back talk about dude, give us the history of malware and what's the stuff you've seen and what do you got tucked away.
Get him and Allison Nixon.
Oh, Allison's awesome.
One.
I miss Allison. She was on 60 Minutes. That's great. So Allison
she was on 60 Minutes.
She was a host on Security Weekly. Used to live here in the area in Rhode Island, and she was on 60 Minutes. I haven't watched I gotta go back and watch the whole thing.
Yeah, it's good.
I watched this segment. It's up. You can find it on YouTube because I was watching it because Rob Joyce, who recently retired, I was watching it to watch his segment, and I'm watching it, and they were talking to several different people this segment, and they got to Allison Nixon. It's like, man, she looks really familiar.
Right.
And I'm like, wait a minute, I think she was on the 500.
Yeah, she was
500 episode, the pen testing roundtable. So I checked it out, and yeah, it was her. So, and she had a lot more airtime than Rob Joyce. But
it's awesome.
What was it still Security Weekly when Allison was here?
Yeah, it was. I picked up on a couple of cool stories. How to run Android on your Raspberry Pi 5, which I had this kind of I was today years old when I realized you could run Android on Raspberry Pi. It's just something I never it never occurred to me. I always got Android phones, and recently from AliExpress that I used to run Android on, and I was like, oh, well, yeah, of course you could run it on why wouldn't you be able to run on a Raspberry Pi 5? And there's actually multiple distributions that make an Android for your Raspberry Pi 5. They talked about one I had not heard about before that, why is that loading in a really small font? Mteria is an Android distribution for Raspberry Pi, but they also talk about Lineage also being able to run on a Raspberry Pi 5. And I'm like, well, that's really cool. I'm like, why am I I got these like weird Android devices. I'm like, I can just put it on a random Raspberry Pi board, which I thought was really cool. But also, like, I think about use cases for that, and if you want to build like your own entertainment device, right? Like this is one of my trains of thought with this, because and it goes back to like my Android TV research that I did. It was basically validating what other people were doing with looking at Android TV devices and going, hey, it comes with malware. And so like I bought some of these devices, reverse engineered, and I'm like, yeah, like it's totally legit. They do come with malware. And I'm like, also your smart TVs, the security on your smart TVs is absolutely atrocious. And what I learned in some of this research is there's an Android like API interface that apps can use to do attestation for the Android system that they're running on. So, for example, if Netflix, the Android app, gets loaded on a device, the Netflix Android app will use the Google Android API to attest to what version of Android it's running on. And if it's not a genuine version and it doesn't meet these other criteria, the Netflix app goes, yeah, I'm not gonna run, because Netflix is worried about intellectual property and people pirating content. I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. So if you get one of these, a Raspberry Pi, and you're putting your own Android on it, it's going to be really hard to, I think, run some of these commercial streaming apps, because they all attest to what version of Android am I running on. And then there's all like, you go to XDA forums. There's all ways to like fake like what I'm not running on a rooted device, like fake what you're telling the Netflix app to go, I'm not running on a rooted device, I'm a legit device, to get Android running. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game, which I think is kind of fun. So I thought that was pretty cool, because I hate smart TVs. The stuff we've covered about smart TVs recently, I'm like, I don't want to trust smart TVs. I don't want smart TVs on my network. I think it's the whole environment is kind of atrocious. So I want my own device to run that. Right? We've seen there was a couple of Raspberry Pi operating systems or distributions focused on entertainment systems. What was that?
Yeah.
Cody had a bunch. Libre Elec and all. I was playing around with that stuff back in the day, like making my own basically open source device that I would plug into my TV and it would be my entertainment source. So kind of got me thinking about that stuff.
So you mentioned that it's available for Pi 5. Does it, is it available for the older Pis too? Or
I think
I mean, like, feels like
it should be, right? Like if it runs on Pi 5, there's no reason why it can't run on other hardware. So this is Pi 5 plus Android 14. I don't actually know, Bill, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think honestly, if you're looking to, and you probably just said this, but like if you're buying devices off AliExpress, just look, man, all I want is a cheap Android device to hack on to play. Like, I feel like the Raspberry Pi would be a better
option, right?
route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because some of these other, they're limited. The phones that we bought, I bought my tiny little purple phone, if you follow my social media. And I also recently bought the Xiaomi Redmine 7 is only like $10 or $20 more than the little purple device I bought. So I bought like a little purple Android phone for $37.
Wow.
And I was having trouble rooting it because there wasn't a lot of information about how to root it. So then I went to Lineage and I was like, what's one of the cheaper Android phones that you can support on Lineage? And I found a Xiaomi Redmine 7 that I bought for $57 on AliExpress that has complete like rooting instructions. I haven't like rooted it yet, but it's a pretty nice phone actually for just messing around for like $57. I'm like, well, cool. I'll I'll roll the dice and see if I can root it and get a custom Lineage OS on there.
So for Mteria, it looks like they support down to Raspberry Pi 3B.
Yeah, wow. I wouldn't recommend running it on a 3B to be honest. I've not had great luck running like an entertainment device on a Pi 3 or even Kali on a Pi 3. You need a 4 or a 5, I think, to really. That extra computing power is definitely useful when running Kali, in my opinion, when running Kali or some kind of entertainment device. The Pi 5 is really awesome. Like the computing power you get in a Pi 5 is great.
The secondary effect that this article has for me is reminding me that now Raspberry Pis are available. I basically wrote.
Oh yeah, no, totally, dude. You can totally get them
forever.
now. Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
yeah,
eventually I'll
I
get
think
one.
one of the, just thinking it through, I think one of the downsides, though, of if you were to put Android on a Pi is that you're missing out on the cellular radio, which goes to your other storage.
That's a great segue, Bill. Proud of you, man.
Thanks. Yeah, I worked on that for about 10 minutes.
Certain Qualcomm radios that exist in a pretty short list of phones. However, I love how the article kind of like, if you got phones sitting around in a drawer, and I'm like, holy shit, do I have phones sitting around in a drawer? Right? They may have this Qualcomm radio that allows you to turn your phone into a cellular sniffer. I'm like, like,
Cool.
Again, file this in. Like, I was today years old when I realized there are phones out there that have modems that you can basically hack into turning into a cellular sniffer.
I mean, we're
also, you should abide by all the FCC regulations here in the U.S., prefacing it with that. But this article was on Hackaday, and it links to the GitHub repository. Repurposes modems and phones to capture raw 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. They said 5G was kind of spotty. And they list some of the phones in the article. The successfully tested list includes a Nexus 6P phone, which you could probably pick up like pretty cheap on the secondhand market. Let's see,
phone?
A OnePlus 1 and 3, a Samsung Galaxy S4.
Mm-hmm.
I may have an S4 floating around in one of my drawers at home, right? So that was pretty cool.
I mean, this is giving me more nostalgia. It's been that kind of show. Anybody remember the Oki 900 brick phones?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, like this just feels exactly like that. Like you just move the connect the right pin. Now you can listen in on whatever channel. You have to do some very bad hexadecimal equation in order to track the channel as it switches towers, etc. Wasn't that bad, but it was a little weird. But you could turn that into a sniffer as well. The difference being that it was basically entirely open. This being you have to decrypt that.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see like what the output of this, so like I saw that I saw your story, Paul, and I kind of had the same reaction, like, whoa, neat, you can do that. But like when you're actually getting down to it, it'd be interesting to see what kind of the output you would be able to get, right? So I'm just kind of scrolling through here. I don't know if anybody really read through this or not, but what protocols would you be able to see? I mean, is it telco protocols? Like, is it,
can you do like
GSM
an IMSI catcher?
protocols?
Can you intercept SMS messages, that kind of thing? Like, I don't know, was what, ShmooCon 2009 or whatever, right? When we first saw like people doing the IMSI catchers and stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think if anybody's for everyone listening, you should go out and if you have one of those supported devices in your drawers, try it out and let us know. I'd really like to hear,
sure.
Like, come in the Discord and talk about it. I'd really like to hear some of that.
Me too. Like, because that falls in the like, I have so many projects that my projects have projects, is Larry's quote. And so like if other people are like have some time and have some of the gear, I'm curious to see what your mileage varies. What did you get it to work?
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe we'll have you in the show to talk about it. Like that'd be a fun segment, cool. Right? We dig up all this like really weird esoteric stuff that appeals to us, which is also like my story number 9.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you realize you're weird when you're watching a YouTube video of someone desoldering a flash chip from a Polycom phone, and I was totally engrossed in this dude. It was like a 30-minute video, and I was totally watching it. I'm like, and like the video's like literally him with a hot air rework, like working on the chip, talking about like, I want to apply heat to the center to loosen up some of that solder, but I also want to go over the pins to loosen up that solder. And like, I don't want to premature, like I don't want to break anything, because he's like, I want to reattach this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. And I was just totally like, it was very soothing to me. It was kind of like, when you watch the videos like online of like people like pressure washing, and it's very soothing.
Yeah.
That's the same thing with this video. I was like, oh, that's like it's really soothing to like watch him just heat up the chip, and like eventually like it pops off. I'm like, that's so
I know
cool.
exactly what you're talking about. I watch there's a guy on YouTube. He's like, I think he's an English guy, and he just buys broken electronics and he just fixes it. And it'll be like an hour-long video. It's just so relaxing. I don't know why, because like I want to see how other people tackle that problem. Like, would it be the same as the way that I would do it?
And they're fixing stuff. So I was talking about this with someone, I remember who, but I was talking about how like I watch the videos on Instagram. I subscribe to all the channels that are fixing electronics. They get a Dell laptop and the power adapter is like not working. It's not charging the laptop. And they take the thing apart. They're desoldering chips. They're replacing capacitors in the whole thing. And I'm watching it, just exactly what you said, Bill, to see how they do it, to see how they approach the problem. Because the next time I need to reverse engineer a board, I want that in my like database, right? Like I'm building up my knowledge of how they're doing all that stuff. And I think it's really satisfying to watch them take that broken old laptop and go, oh yeah, like this resistor, capacitor, whatever it is, I desoldered it and I put a new one on and now it works. I'm like, oh, I just think that's so cool.
Sure.
Like,
and you learn how to use a multimeter for real.
Dude, they're totally like the equipment they have is amazing. The multimeters and they use thermal cameras, and they're like, oh look, this capacitor is overheating on there. Like, let's go swap that one out. I'm like, that's so cool. It's very like dotted line to what we do, right? I think if you're into hardware hacking, that's, I think, Bill and I's recommendation, right? Like, go watch these videos of people doing the repairs.
Yeah, and I think it removes the magic too, right? Like, so like, like, wow, that it is totally like feasible to fix.
Yeah, dude, it's physics. It's physics, dude, right? Like, it comes down to just physics at the end of the day. Yep.
Often, in just figuring out how the part is bad to begin with, which part, because some circuit boards are a maze.
Oh, like, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Leveraging this methodology is how I got my first 50-inch rear projection TV for free. Got it on Craigslist from a guy. He was an electrical engineer, couldn't figure out why it was broken, gave it to me. And I go to turn it on and I can hear the capacitors dying. And I found them, went to Radio Shack. 10 cents later, I basically reflowed this thing, repaired them, and it worked. Had to tweak it a little bit.
And when it works, man, that feeling of right? When it works.
But so I don't know if I think I was reading an article about that exact thing with counterfeit capacitors. Right? Because all these things are manufactured in China with varying degrees of quality control. And there was like,
that's generous.
So like you got the part number on the capacitor. And so there's basically like fake cheaper versions of the capacitor that have a much higher failure rate that make their way in the supply chain. I think it was in the context of supply chain. I was reading this article, and like what it came down to for me was like why someone will love a particular model laptop, but if someone else buys that same model laptop, they're like, this thing's crap and it failed and I had to send it back and get a new motherboard. One of the reasons for that is because some of the models got the real capacitors that went through the full testing mechanisms, but some of the other laptops were actually fake parts like
That's
faux
crazy.
parts that they put in there that have a much higher failure rate, and therefore your capacitors or your resistors or whatever the component is failed, and therefore you have a bad experience with that. And so,
I mean, I've seen that before too. Like you'll be buying something and people be like, well, you want the one that was manufactured
in this
the
time frame,
Taiwan,
right, or this
in the
factory,
Taiwan factory, right? Yep.
That happens with rum too. Like, do you get the
Oh, it happens with
Oh.
everything. Oh, absolutely. Anything that has components, rum, cigars, whatever it is,
Yeah.
absolutely, 1,000%.
Because they're like, oh, well, it's in the same bottle, but it was from this distillery. That one's really good. This one is terrible.
Awesome. Lee, you got any other stories past couple of minutes?
You might enjoy my number one. Just because I was hoping to get to it before Jeff left. Chrome 124 put out by default enabled the post-quantum Kyber algorithms. And some TLS... The TLS is supposed to ignore the things it doesn't understand, so it moves on, and some of the older blow chunks when the browser says I support Kyber. So there's actually a website I put in there that's isitquantumsafe.info that you go to it and you can click on the is your web browser and tell you how to turn it on for the browser you're using.
Here's Lee fishing all of us.
Yeah, he got me. He got me already. Yeah.
Sorry, trolling's a thing. Sometimes I actually manage to do it. But like I said, I just thought it was kind of cool that this stuff is actually in our browsers, and there's actually, you can put it in your web servers and stuff if you can compile the modules for it. So while I believe Q-Day, when the quantum stuff is going to be new, whatever, is a long ways away, but I thought it's kind of fun to play with the new algorithms and see how they work. And oh, by the way, you can turn this stuff off in the settings in Chrome. If you have Enterprise Chrome, you can turn it off if it's breaking things.
Yeah, dude, Chrome's a beast. I mean, Chrome's like
Chrome, Firefox, Edge, they all support it.
They're all like operating systems in and of themselves, dude. It's
right,
it's scary. It is. It's scary.
It's enough for you to build a whole computer around it running a Chrome operating system.
I hate to tell you guys, but whoever just sucked up my data will be able to decrypt my connection to isitquantumsafe.info in about 7 years because I did not use quantum safe algorithms.
I'll hold my breath.
I am quantum safe. I'm very diligent about updating my Chrome, good, bad, or indifferent.
You're going to go on the quantum wall of shame. Now.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that would be kind of a fun, not too deep, but if you've got things that are broken, you got to turn off the option, and it's in the about config on Firefox, and I forget the other the option on the Chrome. I think is under Chrome //flags, and you can turn it off. But
so many nuances. I remember I was going through Chrome, like how it uses the graphics card, and then there was that resource that was like through Chrome it can access your hardware on your GPU, right? And I think one of the access mechanisms is for accelerated performance. And that was crazy. And then recently I was looking at, on a per site basis, there's a temporary storage for each site within Chrome, because we use Riverside. We use Riverside to record. Yeah. I was looking at Riverside's requirements. I went down this whole rabbit hole of like, how does Riverside do recordings? Where does it store them? It's in Chrome's temporary storage. I'm like, is that a per site basis? Can I increase that storage on a per site basis? Like if I clear cache, is that a shared cache? Like is the temporary storage where Riverside is recording audio and video the same storage space where I'm storing all my other cached content? And dude, it's Adrian Sanabria and I were like going back and forth with like basically unanswered questions. Like, we should research this more, and we joked, we're like, we're gonna create like a like Chrome Security Weekly. Basically, that's how deep down the rabbit hole we got.
What's funny about that is the other day when I don't remember who, but someone told us to to clear cache, and I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, like you don't want to ever
like,
clear cache in your regular browser.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
So I created the whole thing. We create a new profile, and you run Riverside in it, and then you can safely clear cache. And then it begged all those other questions about how is it storing cache, where is it storing cache, is it shared, the whole thing, dude.
That makes total sense. I was just kind of being like, yeah, I did it, but I didn't really do it. So I mean, but now I understand
the whole rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I mean, I just
Unless
appreciate.
you really want to reset your world, don't clear that cache.
I just appreciate that Chrome continues to get new features and functions constantly. Like it's kind of nice every time. I feel like every time I open up my computer, because it's a Chromebook, I get something new out of it. It continues to improve. It's
dude,
it's decidedly different from
game changer for me. Yeah. If you right click on a tab in Chrome, I don't know if you know this or not. Right click on a Chrome tab, and you can click on close tabs to the right.
Yes.
Not if you close the tab that's furthest to
the
right.
Game changer for me. I'm like, oh my God, that's so awesome. Look at all the CPU and memory I free up by just doing that every once in a while, right?
It does a really good job.
There's another option below that option that says close all the other tabs. You really want to cut down your resources.
But then it puts
history, reopen all the tabs I closed by mistake.
Then you put all your other tabs to sleep. You got to enable the memory saver thing, and it puts your tabs to sleep. It's just, again, it's like a whole. I think a browser is an operating system. We've said that for. I think the first time we said that on the show was like 12 years ago, right? Like your browser is an operating system.
But nobody can touch Tyler in terms of tab count. We're just amateurs. What has he got? 100, 200 tabs open, something like that.
It's his like claim to fame.
Like but it's like my desktop at home. I have 24 cores on an AMD Threadripper with 256 gigs of RAM. I can have as many Chrome windows with as many tabs as I want, and then on top of it, I can run. I run VMs, like I've got Linux VMs, I've got Windows VMs running on top of it, and
you're
still
such a
like
nerd.
Dude, it's the nerdiest. It's the nerdy, and I built that system in like late 2020.
So I picked up a desktop server about a week or so ago at a yard sale for $50. I got a function. Well, it was not functioning at the time. I had to reseat the RAM, all 32 gigs of it. And it's a Dell Precision 8250 Xeon processor from 2018. And I refuse to upgrade it. I am forcing this thing to do as much as humanly possible with the resources it has available. I actually got Llama 3 running on it today, and I'm in the process of figuring out how to tweak it to make it run faster. It's actually doing a really good job.
Oh yeah, dude. Xeon's an amazing
great overclock it.
Yeah.
I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's not so much the power, because those things are power, but they're also power hungry.
Yes.
Right?
Your electric bill is going to be high.
Not mine. Yeah. My electricity comes with
like Snoop Dogg kind of high, dude.
So he doesn't have to pay his electric bill explicitly.
Nope.
You bum.
Nope. It's okay. It's actually hasn't been too bad. I've got a kilowatt thing on it. It's not pulling that much all the time.
That's cool.
It gets pretty quiet.
There's the cooling system.
Yeah, it's
really
surprisingly quiet.
Before you were doing some stuff with some LLMs. What were you doing?
Yeah,
I'll tell you what I was doing if you tell me what you're doing.
All right, so
you show me yours if I'll show you mine.
So
family show.
I have so every year I take on a number of personal projects focused on like basically I sit and I go, hey, what am I terrible at? What do I know enough about? This year was a mixture of rum and tequila knowledge, cocktailing, AI, and a few other things. Like how do I improve?
It's a great mix. It goes well together.
Oh yeah. So I at this point I've acquired something like 35 bottles of liquor on my shelf.
We should hang out.
Yeah.
Next broadcast is from Dave's house.
Seriously. Yeah. All I have is good stuff. It's really unfortunate. And it's more than I can consume in a lifetime. But right now I'm focused on how do I get a mixture of different AGIs working for me, doing different tasks. And right now I'm in the process of assessing which one I like the most, a combination of things I can run locally and services. And how do I,
Have you tried Gemini? I haven't tried Gemini
I
yet.
have tried Gemini. I'm not
Okay.
impressed.
Okay.
But right now
People say Gemini is good at generating code, like better than ChatGPT, which ChatGPT 4 is pretty good at generating Python code. Although my experience today, I was trying to generate code to interrogate CVE data, and I ran into errors because NVD kind of deprecated some of the mechanisms to do that, and I got an error, and this was like I've never in my technology career, which has spanned many years at this point, I was like, generate this code, and generated the code, and I ran it, and the code gave me an error.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, ChatGPT, the previous code you gave me generated this error. Can you fix that? And it was like, oh, here's some new Python code that deals with that error. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. But then I ran the new code and it generated the same error. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, it's spotty. Like, I get it. But the fact that I could ask it to do that, and it knew what I was asking, whether it fixed the problem or not, I was like, okay, fine. Like, we're still working out the bugs. But the fact that I could ask it that, and it knew what I was asking to go, oh, let me fix that bug in the code for you. I was like, that's really cool. Cause like, I remember when I first started writing code, nothing existed like this, even close. Like, I had a book that was printed on paper and I was trying to write code. So we've come a long way.
Were you using a specific GPT to run this, or were you just running it in?
It was just ChatGPT 4.
Okay, so
I have a paid subscription to ChatGPT 4.
So if you go to the Explore GPT section, you can choose a Python specific code developer agent, and that might help. What I've been experimenting with.
You have to show me how do you you have to show me how to do that.
Yeah, go right here. Sorry for folks who are playing at home. Select Explore GPTs and then just type the word Python and then choose one of them and start a chat with that one.
Okay, I gotcha.
And then that'll be specific to your utilitarian purpose.
Yeah, okay.
And there's a bunch of different ones, and then they.
I think it was confused as to the APIs. I was trying to be like API specific, and it was getting.
These are more.
I'll try the Python one though.
Purpose design, more experienced GPTs that will
like trained more on.
They're trained.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I've been doing is basically comparing the two services that I like most right now, and then comparing it to my own like self-hosted Llama 3. So I'm really enjoying Perplexity, especially for explaining complex concepts, especially where they relate to studies and different forms of research databases.
I like that. I want to come back to that because all the articles that we cover, I'm like, take this complex research paper and explain it to me like I'm 12 years old.
It does an amazing
like
job.
that is a useful feature to me too that I need to explore.
You could just say like, hey, review this study for me. Or you can say, go look at the available studies out there, the ones that are well regarded, and give me a summary and then like practical understanding of this.
Like compare the well-known studies to this new study, give me a comparison. Like when I was at B-Sides Charm, and kind of closing thoughts, one of my friends was like, look, with respects to AI and LLMs, you're likely not going to lose your job to AI, but you're more likely to lose your job to someone who knows how to use AI. And I've been experimenting with it, and now even more once my friend said that to me, and I was like, oh yeah, I get it now.
It's probably true.
Right. It's a tool that can help us. And if you don't know how to use it, other people are going to use it as a tool to advance it. So, but it's spotty. I was having a conversation earlier today with Sean, and I was like, dude, it's really spotty. Like sometimes I use it and it's super helpful, and other times I use it and it's like complete out, like it's not all that helpful. And sometimes that's the AI engine itself, but other times that's the way I'm prompting it, and I want to learn to get better.
Yeah, you need to figure it out. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to write a children's book. So it turns out, you ever spoken to somebody and they immediately start talking to you about their new blockchain thing, and then you start to get a little sleepy? Turns out that works really well with children too. So I want to write a children's bedtime story around blockchain. It's literally going to be called Bedtime for Blockchain. And I was using 2 different AIs to help me write that story. The story actually came out pretty good. The hard part was generating the images in a consistent fashion. I think I'm going to have to go back to Midjourney for that because I know that pretty well.
Right. Yeah.
And you can actually eke consistent images out of that. But overall, like I'm really enjoying the lab experiment, doing comparatives in both ChatGPT and Perplexity, which is related to the Rabbit R1, if you're familiar. But they're both. It's a really interesting process.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Over.